Okay, so we've all heard of the 27 Club, right? It's one of those big, tragic rock and roll legends. But what if it's not a legend? According to the source material we're digging into today, it's not a tragedy, and it's definitely not some weird coincidence. It's a crime scene. Yeah, the source material for this explainer, it's this incredibly detailed document, and it argues that this whole story, it has nothing to do with the dangers of being a celebrity. No, it's about a highly coordinated operation, a decapitation strike aimed right at the heart of the 1960s counterculture. The whole point was to shut down the movement's most influential voices, permanently. And the timing is absolutely critical here. The source claims these deaths were intentionally lined up with a specific astrological window, something called the Saturn return, which, you guessed it, kicks in right around age 27. So this wasn't just random chance. It was a ritual, a symbolic sacrifice, to basically announce the brutal end of the whole age of Aquarius. So let's open the first file. We're going to start with the founder of the Rolling Stones, Brian Jones. Now, to really get what the source is arguing, you have to stop thinking about these as stories you've read in magazines. Think of them as cold case files, just sitting there, waiting for someone to finally take a second look. You know the official story. It's pretty straightforward. Rock star, too many drugs, too much alcohol, and he tragically drowns in his pool. End of story. But the source lays out a forensic case that points to something much, much darker. It brings up all this contradictory testimony from people who were actually there, people who said the police changed their stories. And, maybe most important of all, there's a confession. This whole thing really pivots on that alleged confession. The source says that a guy named Frank Thorogood, a construction worker Jones was apparently about to fire, admitted to the murder on his deathbed years later. And if that's true, well, that changes everything. It flips the script from a sad accident to a full-blown homicide, where a simple work dispute becomes the perfect cover story. Okay, now fast forward about 16 months, and another icon is gone. This time, it's Jimi Hendrix. And the official story? It's one we've heard before, just a simple overdose. But again, the source argues that if you actually look at the physical evidence, it tells a story that's not just different, it's horrifying and, frankly, impossible. So the official report says Hendrix choked on his own vomit. But the source's indictment? It claims he was drowned, not in water, but with red wine. This whole theory is built on two key pieces of evidence. First, the really chilling testimony from the paramedic who was first on the scene, and second, a confession that reportedly came from Hendrix's own manager, who, by the way, was a former intelligence operative. Listen to this. It's from the paramedic himself, a guy named Reg Jones. He said Hendrix's airway was totally clear, but that his body and the bed were just soaked in a massive amount of red wine. According to the source, that just doesn't add up to an overdose. What it does look like is the scene after someone's been waterboarded. And then, get this, just 16 days after Hendrix dies, it happens again. Janis Joplin is found dead in her hotel room in Hollywood. And again, the official cause of death is chalked up to an accidental overdose. But the source zeroes in on two major red flags, anomalies that suggest this wasn't an accident at all, but a very clean, very targeted execution. Okay, so the first weird thing is the scene itself. It was clean, too clean. All the drug stuff, the paraphernalia was gone. And that just doesn't happen with an accidental overdose. But the second thing is even more damning. It's the drug itself. This was not your average street heroin, not even close. And this number, this is what it all comes down to. The heroin in her system was somewhere between 40 and 50% pure. Now, to put that in perspective, that kind of purity was basically unheard of on the streets back then. So the source presents this as the smoking gun, the signature of what's called a hot shot. That's a dose that's been intentionally made way too powerful, designed to kill an unsuspecting user. All right, the last case file in this really tight 2-year time frame is the frontman for The Doors, Jim Morrison. He dies in Paris, and what's fascinating here is that the biggest clue isn't something that was found at the scene. No, it's what was deliberately and very suspiciously missing from the official investigation. So the official story goes that Jim Morrison just died of heart failure. But here's the thing. Under French law at the time, if a healthy 27-year-old suddenly dies, an autopsy is pretty much mandatory. But for Morrison, it never happened. The source argues this wasn't an oversight. It was a cover-up, a high-level move to stop anyone from finding out what multiple witnesses claim really happened, that he died of a heroin overdose in a nightclub bathroom. So you have to ask, why would Morrison be a target? Well, the source points straight to his family background. His dad was a U.S. Navy admiral. Not just any admiral, but the one in command during the Gulf of Tonkin incident. You know, the event that basically lit the fuse for the entire Vietnam War. So when Jim Morrison becomes this huge public anti-war figure, it's not just some kid rebelling. It's a massive betrayal of the military establishment coming from inside one of its own families. So look, if you take any one of these deaths by itself, you could maybe write it off as a tragic accident. It's plausible, but the source is adamant. To get to the truth, you have to stop looking at them as four separate tragedies. You have to start looking for the pattern, the professional signature that ties them all together. And this is really the heart of the whole argument. The source claims these artists don't just share an age, they share a methodology, a really consistent and frankly chilling professional signature that was designed from the ground up to make a coordinated purge look like anything but. Let's actually break down that signature. Step 1. You take the victim's known habits, drugs, alcohol, and you use them against them. It becomes the perfect, built-in cover story. Step 2, you use proxies, people close to them, like a girlfriend or a dealer, so you have plausible deniability. Step 3, you introduce something that shouldn't be there, an anomaly, like insanely pure heroin or a ridiculous amount of wine. And the final step, you mess with the crime scene. You clean it up, you get rid of evidence, and you take control of the story from the very beginning. And here's where the motive comes in, and it's documented. This alleged signature, this playbook, it didn't just come out of thin air. It's a perfect match for the tactics of a very real, now declassified government program called COINTELPRO. Run by the FBI, its stated goal was to neutralize cultural leaders. And guess what? All 4 of these artists were on their watch list. But wait, because according to the source, getting rid of these guys was only step 1. The source actually calls them Gnostic prophets, basically, people who were challenging the system on a spiritual level, not just a political one. So to really, truly silence them, the powers that be needed a phase 2, a massive psychological warfare campaign to control how we remember them and to bury the crime for good. And this was the master stroke. They took what the source calls a political purge and twisted it, reframing it as this romantic, tragic myth, the 27 Club. The source has a name for this, agnostic inversion. It's a lie that's so total, it's the complete opposite of what really happened, and it was designed specifically to hide the true nature of the fight. I mean, think about it. This news story was the perfect cover-up. It completely shifts the blame. It's no longer about the people who did it, it's about the victims themselves. A story about state power and murder gets turned into a simple warning about the dangers of fame and rock and roll. And just like that, they made sure that we would all remember these deaths as a sad cliche instead of what the source calls a political crime. So in the end, the source material leaves us with this really provocative idea. It argues the whole 27 Club myth was created to make us ask the wrong question entirely. It wants us to stop seeing these artists as just self-destructive rock stars, and instead see them as spiritual rebels, as Gnostic prophets. And it demands that we completely re-examine one of the most famous stories in modern music history.